All right, I've chosen to start with the event a hospital requests an organ. That's a situation, a circumstance that we have to deal with, that we do get requests from hospitals. Now, you'll recall much earlier in the course, I said you can start absolutely anywhere you want. So in your list of events, when you have your preliminary list, we may find some more, we may not, we'll see as we go along. But I said, you can actually start anywhere you like. And you pick a place to start that you're comfortable with. Well, I've chosen to start with a hospital request an organ. The first thing we do is simply draw that bubble to represent the process. And don't label it at all. And the first question we ask is, how do we know that a hospital requests an organ? Well, we know because we get the request. So I'm going to put hospital here as a terminator, and I'm going to put a data flow from the hospital to us in terms of the processes of the system. Okay? And what we're going to get from the hospital is an organ request. And I'm just going to put request there. The second question we're going to ask is, what are we going to do about that? Okay, what do we need to do about it? Well, we need to know, first of all, if this is a member hospital. You remember in the scope, we determined that we only deal with members, we don't deal with non-members. So I'm going to look at our list of member hospitals. So I'm going to put hospital here as an object. And I'm going to query that object to see if it's a member or not. Okay. So, and I'm going to get a response, and I'll just put the arrow there for now. And I'm just going to put the word member with a question mark. And I'm going to do a Q for query and an R for response. So I'm going to look at my list of member hospitals, and I'm going to get a response coming back. What do I do with that response? Well, there's only two possible answers. Yes, it's a member, or no, it's not. We always deal with the negative first. You remember we talked about that much earlier as well? So let's say that they're not a member. We got a request from a hospital that's not a member. What do we want to do? Well, as we talk to our subject matter experts, we determined that for the scope of this project, we're just going to reject it. We're going to send it back to them and say, sorry, you're not a member. We can't deal with this. Now remember that this is just an exercise, okay? In a real life project, we might want to go and do a whole bunch of other things. Submit it to the membership department, have somebody solicit that membership. But in this case, we're just going to simply reject it. And I'm just going to put reject here and telling the hospital, sorry, we're not going to have that. So what do we want to remember about what we've done? Well, we want to remember that we've received the request. So I'm going to put organ request. I'm going to call it organ request rather than just a general request, because I like to be specific in terms of data whenever possible. And the only time I'm not specific is when it's not possible, of course. Right? So I'm going to put the request. Sorry, I'll rewrite that for you. Right here in this object, and we'll keep track of it. Okay. Now, we talked about the 6 rules of attributing business data to an object, because you remember an object has to be 2 or more data attributes. Otherwise, it's not an object, it's just a data attribute, a single data attribute. So for business purposes, it has to be 2 or more. So hospital, of course, has data such as the name of the hospital, the location, the contact information, and so forth. So we know right away that there's several data items. And you can do that offline. You don't have to do all the nitty-gritty data finding and data attribution with your subject matter expert or your clients in the room. You can do that offline. Over here on the organ request, there's a number of things too. So organ type, for example, would be part of that request. what other kind of information might we have? We might have the blood type. We may have a number of other things as well related to the organ that's requested. For example, we may have a deadline. Now, in real life, we don't have deadlines, okay? But in this case, let's say that we have a deadline for that request. In other words, the hospital said, we have to have it by Tuesday at noon, otherwise it's not going to work. Okay? So what have we got here now? Let's take a look. Okay? Hospital requests an organ. We get an organ request from the hospital. We determine if that hospital is a member. If it's not a member, we reject the request. And if it is a member, we record or remember the organ request. That's all there's to it. Remember, we're not looking at the technology. We're not looking at anything else except for the fact that we got an organ request. So I can write the narrative at this point. Remember earlier, excuse me, I said that for every data flow coming in to the process and for every data flow going out from the process, we have to have a task, a statement that says what the task is. So I can say, receive a request from a hospital. Determine if the hospital is a member. If it is not a member, reject the request. If it is a member, record the request. And that's all there's to it. So we would write what I just said. We'd write that narrative. It's pretty straightforward. And we'd then give this a name. Now, we name the process by looking at what we're doing, not what the hospital is doing. We look at it from the inside out, not from the outside in. And we name it with a strong verb-noun type of construct. They get more than two words, but it has to be a verb-noun construct this time because it is a process, whereas the event is the situation or the circumstance, which never starts with a verb. And I'm going to call it receive request. Receive request. So now we have an event statement, a diagram, and in that diagram we have the terminator. You don't always have a terminator in a diagram. You have some data flows, you have a couple of objects. It's not a very difficult one at all. The next thing we do, we also have a narrative as well. Remember what I said is what we can write. The next thing I'm going to do is the business rules table.